I can see him, asshole!
No. Oh, this isn't what it looks like.
I said hands in the air! Now!
Oh, fuck. Did you know Nintendo used to give a gun out with every console they sold? Their history with toy guns is rather extensive, considering it's actually illegal to own a real gun in Japan, and culturally, they're not exactly the biggest fans. But looking at Nintendo in the early 70s, you'd never know, as they were popping off with all sorts of light gun toys for kids. The most famous and iconic of these is undoubtedly the NES Zapper. It became the poster child for weird Nintendo controllers you use for that one game, and then you just kind of forget about it. Like Rob and the Power Pad. It was first released as a peripheral for the Nintendo Famicom in Japan, but the legacy of this bad boy goes well beyond the 8-bit gaming generation. Some of Nintendo's most beloved games on the NES are Zapper games like Duck Hunt, Wild Gunman, and Hogan's Alley. Well, at least Duck Hunt.
So, where does you murdering the man back there fit into all of this?
See, that's what I'm trying to explain to you. It was just the NES Zapper.
Well, that NES Zapper functioned like a real gun! With real bullets.
I didn't know that. I just barely bought it from some nice man down the road.
And then Mr. John Doe happens to get shot, right as you are walking by. But you say you're innocent.
Well, yeah, kinda.
This guy's full of shit. Let's send him up the river.
Whoa, wait. Hold on, I know someone who can help.
Alright, while we wait for your little friend to get here, why don't we just run through the story again? From the top.
Okay. Target shooting games have been around for a long-ass time. Popping up even before the turn of the century in Great Britain, coin-operated gun novelty games made their way overseas and became popular with American audiences as well. So it's no surprise that when light-sensing technology was invented in the early 1900s, it was quickly incorporated into these types of games, creating the light gun game. Nearly 100 years ago, the Seeburg Rayalite rifle range was the first light gun game on the scene. Notably, this snazzy machine centered around duck hunting, which kicked off what would become one of the most long-standing themes in light gun games: hunting. Innovations in gun games were interrupted by World War II when companies were contributing to the war effort, but not before a few war-themed games made it out of the gate, like Inkini's anti-aircraft machine gun in 1939, which added sound effects and an image projector. After the war, Seeburg returned to hunting themes with Rayalite games, like Shoot the Bear, which came complete with a hunting dog. This became one of the earliest light gun games to be imported into Japan thanks to Rosen Enterprises, a company that would eventually be merged with Nihon Goraku Busan to create Sega Enterprises. During the 60s, as companies moved away from light gun games in favor of gun variations that took up less space, Sega put its own spin on these newer styles of gun games with concepts like Periscope in 1966, where players could shoot torpedoes at enemy submarines in an immersive arcade cabinet design. Incidentally, Periscope was also developed by Masaya Nakamura, the eventual founder of Namco! Namco! A few years later, Sega would reintroduce the duck hunting theme to one of their gun games while incorporating projection technology in their electromechanical Duck Hunt game. Using similar technology, they would follow up with the even more impressive Killer Shark in 1972, which was immortalized after making a cameo appearance in the 1975 summer blockbuster Jaws.
What the hell does any of this have to do with anything?
Hold on, I was just getting to that. Could you give me a second? Sheesh! If you've ever taken a dive into the early history of Nintendo, you'll know just how tricky it is to find exact information on what happened when. So this is where things get a little dicey.
Well, it looks like I've arrived just in time.
Kate! Thank God you're here. This guy won't shut up and just listen to me.
Well, that's just rude.
You must be the critical Kate I've been hearing so much about.
That's right, Critical Kate, private investigator.
Well, you'd better start talking before I throw this guy away. And throw the key away, too.
Well, it's quite simple. You see, while Sega was busy releasing games like Periscope and Duck Hunt, Nintendo employee Gunpei Yokoi was cranking out a series of successful toys and novelties. Then one day, an employee from consumer electronics company Sharp showed up and tried to sell Nintendo on incorporating a light sensing unit he'd developed for mass production. This employee's name was Masayuki Uemura. He and Yokoi put their heads together, and the result was a toy version of the popular light-sensing guns from the arcade, which Nintendo began selling in 1970 under the name Kosenju SP.
The toy gun and rifle were sold alongside light-sensing targets, like spring-loaded jumping bottles that exploded in two after being hit, scenes like Electro Safari and Electro Bird, which hung on the wall like paintings, and Electro Poker, which was basically just a roulette wheel, and a reminder that Nintendo was getting kids hooked on gambling far before Pokemon ever hit the scene.
According to the History of Nintendo Volume 1, Kosenju SP was likely the first toy gun to make use of advanced electronic technology, and ended up being Japan's most popular toy of the year.
And after it exploded in popularity, Nintendo smuggled Uemura from Sharp to help make even more toys, like Kosenju Custom, guns and targets that worked over a much longer range. Unfortunately, they were also much more expensive and quickly bombed.
Look, I don't care about any of that. I just want to know what happened.
Yes, but we're establishing important context.
If you'd quit interrupting...
Fine. Continue.
Legend has it that Nintendo President Hiroshi Yamauchi was reading a magazine article about shooting competitions when he asked Yokoi whether the Kosenju guns could be modified into some kind of shooting range simulation. But what would be a good space in which to set up such a thing?
In the prior decade, bowling alleys had been all the rage in Japan, but by the end of the 60s, it had been eclipsed in popularity by karaoke, leaving many bowling alleys completely deserted. Yamauchi seized on this opportunity and began renovating one of these abandoned alleys into the laser clay shooting system. Gunpei Yokoi and Masayuki Uemura were soon joined by Genyo Takeda, a recent graduate of Shizuoka Government University who had studied semiconductors, creating what I like to call the Fab 3.
Meanwhile, American electronics company Magnavox was about to release the world's first home video game console, dubbed Odyssey, and contracted Nintendo to collaborate on the light gun peripheral. While the internal components came from the team at Magnavox, the outer plastic shell utilized a modified mold from Nintendo's Kosenju rifle.
I see. So, since they had already been making light gun stuff, they could easily repurpose their gun designs to help Magnavox. I'll be damned.
Eventually, the Fab 3's work would pay off, and in 1973, the laser clay shooting system would be released to the public. It was a novel use of the light gun technology and allowed players to shoot at moving images of clay pigeons, which were projected onto a large mural at the end of the old bowling lanes.
After demonstrating the game for the media, laser clay experienced a rapid surge in popularity. As Nintendo began selling the expensive installation to business owners looking to convert their bowling alleys, Yamauchi went so far as to purchase a few locations of his own.
Unfortunately, Nintendo's fate took a turn for the worst when Japan's economy was rocked by the infamous 1973 oil crisis. Due to the US and Japan's support of Israel during the Yom Kippur War, the OAPEC, which controlled oil production in Arab states, placed an embargo on oil exports to those countries. This caused the price of oil to skyrocket, leading many of Nintendo's clients to cancel their orders for the laser clay shooting system, and ultimately left Nintendo 5 billion yen in debt, and on the verge of bankruptcy.
Well, ain't that a kick in the pants?
Truly, it honestly could have been the end for Nintendo, but they kept going. In response to Nintendo's financial strain, Yokoi proposed an idea for a smaller machine that would use a film projector.
When Japan had first started importing film projectors from the West, before World War II, they also imported Western films. And when television sets became popular, they likewise imported Western TV shows. As a result, the people of Japan were exposed to a great deal of American culture at a time when one of the biggest genres in American entertainment was the Western. One of the earliest arcade games with a Western theme was a mysterious lost coin-op machine called Western Gun, which was sold by Sega in the early 1960s. By the tail end of the 60s, Sega experienced a huge hit in Gunfight, a competitive Western game in which players manipulated their plastic toy cowboys to see who could land the most hits. Soon after, what appeared to be an unofficial home version of the game showed up, manufactured by Nintendo, branded under the name Wild Gunman.
Following the collapse of the laser clay shooting system, it only makes sense that while Yokoi was looking for a way to repurpose their light gun technology, the idea of a gun-toting cowboy would serve as perfect inspiration for their new game, also called Wild Gunman.
This Wild Gunman was a quick-draw game in which the player faced off against an enemy gunfighter right out of a film. Or they would have been right out of a film if they weren't currently in a film. Look, you know what I mean. The player needed to wait until their opponent's eyes flashed before they could draw their gun and shoot. Unbeknownst to the player, there were actually 2 projectors running inside the cabinet simultaneously. If the player succeeded, they'd see footage of the gunman crumpled over in defeat. But if they failed, the player would instead see the words "You lost" superimposed over their triumphant opponent. The player was required to face off against a total of 4 gunmen, with the goal being to win as many shootouts as possible.
Wild Gunman was popular enough in Japan that it led to a bottle shooting game the next year called Shooting Trainer. When Sega brought both of those games overseas the following year, American audiences particularly enjoyed Wild Gunman. One 1977 newspaper even called it the hit of the summer season at arcades everywhere.
Although it was positively received, Wild Gunman was expensive and fragile, which might be why finding a working version today is so difficult. What footage does exist is usually pretty poor quality. However, during my own investigation of Wild Gunman, I was able to find a rare glimpse of the game inside the 80s schlock comedy Gas. And since then, a few high-quality prints have been found by the same guy who remastered Manos Hand of Fate. A small preview of this newly found footage can be seen in my video essay about the making of Donkey Kong. And if you'd like more information about the original Wild Gunman and my initial hunt for the footage, I have another video all about that, which you can watch after you've finished this one.
After working together on the laser clay shooting system, the Fab 3 disbanded and began working on different projects. Genyo Takeda went on to create EVR Race the following year. EVR Race was followed by EVR Car Race and EVR Baseball, after which Takeda switched focus completely to electronic arcade machines, which utilized semiconductor-based technology, his specialty. Masayuki Uemura led Nintendo's foray into the home video game market with the Color TV game series. These primitive consoles brought experiences similar to Pong and Breakout into Japanese homes for the very first time, and it gave Hiroshi Yamauchi the confidence that there was money to be made with home video games.
Meanwhile, Gunpei Yokoi followed Wild Gunman with 2 war-themed film games called Skyhawk and Battle Shark, and created a smaller version of Laser Clay called Mini Laser Clay. And after Namco had international success with a laser clay-alike called Shoot-Away, Nintendo would try to introduce their own similarly sized version called Laser Clay Twin.
Yokoi would also combine his experience with his toy-making prowess to produce one of his most remarkable inventions, Nintendo Kosenju Duck Hunt, in 1976. This version of Duck Hunt allowed you to project an animated duck onto a wall, which you could shoot at with the included shotgun, and the game could detect if the duck was hit or not. It's been speculated that Kosenju Duck Hunt was possibly inspired by Sega's Duck Hunt, which also used projected images of ducks as targets.
That same year, Nintendo went back to the Kosenju Custom Well with Custom Lion and Custom Gunman. The latter, a cute little toy that would crumple when shot, similarly to the plastic figures in Sega's Gunfight.
Wow! Nintendo sure liked ripping off Sega, didn't they?
And they weren't the only ones. Sega's Gunfight also inspired a Taito video game called Western Gun, which was licensed and adapted by American company Midway into Gunfight, either or both of which may have inspired a Nintendo game called Sheriff. In fact, when Taito licensed Sheriff from Nintendo so they could release their own version, they renamed it Western Gun Part 2. Though Sega would bring things full circle by doing their own take on Nintendo's Sheriff, reimagined as a martial arts game called Samurai.
Sheriff was designed by Genyo Takeda, with graphics contributed by industrial designer and recent college grad Shigeru Miyamoto. Miyamoto's first real project, supervised by Gunpei Yokoi, would be to convert Nintendo's failed arcade game, Radar Scope, into something new and successful, something that would appeal to the American market. This resulted in the astronomically popular Donkey Kong, and catapulted Nintendo into global success.
Hey, Donkey Kong! I know that one. I used to play that arcade down with Pops at the old convenience store. I remember it like it was yesterday. But it was last year.
This series of events was like dominoes that eventually culminated in Nintendo's most significant invention to that point, the Nintendo Family Computer, or Famicom for short. Created by Masayuki Uemura, the Famicom was a follow-up to the Color TV game series, designed to play interchangeable cartridges based on Nintendo's popular arcade games, like Donkey Kong, Mario Bros., and Popeye.
This was followed by sports games like baseball, tennis, and educational games like Donkey Kong Jr. Math and Popeye's English is Fun, because everyone knows Popeye speaks perfect English. However, with over a decade of experience in light gun-based entertainment up to this point, the obvious direction for Nintendo's next wave of games would be to incorporate the technology into the Famicom's first peripheral, the video shooting series Gun, rebranded in America as the Zapper.
Aha! It's about time! I was beginning to think you all were giving me the runaround.
Never, Detective.
We're only interested in the facts.
The Famicom Gun's design was based off of Nintendo's earlier Kosenju SP gun, both of which are modeled after a Western-style revolver, and when the trigger was pulled, the hammer would snap back and make a popping sound. When the light gun was introduced to the US the following year for the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES, Nintendo of America would completely overhaul the design in favor of a futuristic beam gun style.
One reason for the change was that Nintendo of America needed to make its home console look unlike anything else that had come before. After the North American video game crash of the 80s, a topic steeped in numerous myths and legends that I hope to one day clear up in a separate video essay, console owners reaped the benefits of a market filled to the brim with discounted games, with the unfortunate side effect being that it caused those very same customers to be much less likely to purchase newer full-priced games. As a result, retailers wanted little to do with gaming anymore, and so Nintendo tried to sweeten the deal by packaging their console with futuristic toy peripherals like a high-tech robot and a laser gun.
Either way, the guns work basically the same. A cord comes out of the bottom of the gun and attaches to the connector port. A light sensor is attached inside the gun, which is activated when the trigger is pulled. When the sensor detects white light, it sends a signal that a hit was successful. However, to prevent players from simply pointing the gun at a light and registering a hit, Masayuki Uemura implemented a preventative measure. Whenever the trigger is pulled, the TV displays a black screen for a fraction of a second. The light gun is programmed to look for this black screen and then a flash of light. If it senses only a flash of light with no black screen, the game will register a miss. This is also why the NES is incompatible with current TV displays. Because modern displays are so much more advanced than TVs from the 80s, there's a slight delay when sending the signal from the NES to the TV. Although brief, the delay is long enough that the Zapper won't register the black screen in time, which will always result in a missed shot.
But as cool and innovative as the Famicom Gun and NES Zapper both were, they would be pointless without some equally impressive games. Luckily, the job was being overseen by the hit-making duo of producer Gunpei Yokoi and director Shigeru Miyamoto, along with a crack team that included future Metroid collaborators Makoto Kano, Hiroshi Kiyotake, and Hip Tanaka. Together, they would produce 3 light gun games during the Famicom's first year on the market. Wild Gunman came bundled with the Famicom Gun on February 18, 1984, and was followed by Duck Hunt on April 21st and Hogan's Alley on July 12th.
Does this remind you of anyone? How about this idiot? That's right, it's you! Because you don't have the everything cable! It has all the connections! AC, DC, USB A through C, mini, micro, and regular. VGA, DVI, HDMI, DisplayPort, PS2, SPDIF, firewall. You don't have to be an expert. If it fits, it works! XLR, TRS, HDMI, coax. Forget which end of the cable that you grab. It doesn't matter, because both ends have all the connections. AM, PM, LED, LCD, LSD. It comes in a variety of one convenient size, up 10 feet. Copper, fiber, fire, earth, water, wind, ground, no subground.
I'm sure it works.
Chode, mode, load, toad, code, geothermal, chemothermal, biothermal, biological, astrological, radiological, universal!
Now let's take a look at the games themselves, shall we? We'll go one by one to see what each of these 3 games brought to the table, as well as the impact each of them had on Nintendo. Unfortunately, I don't have access to Wild Gunman or Hogan's Alley on actual NES hardware, so for this video we'll be turning to our old friend, the Wii U Virtual Console. Finally, you're good for something! Showcasing just what the NES Zapper is capable of, we have our first premiere game, Wild Gunman. Put yourself in the middle of a Western showdown. Armed with the Zapper, it takes a quick hand and a dead eye to earn your reward. Draw against the most wanted outlaws in the West, then, if you're brave enough, take on the whole gang at once.
Wild Gunman is, of course, a remake of the 1974 arcade game of the same name, except that it replaces the cinematic gunslingers with cartoony 8-bit characters. Game A is the simplest mode, in which you face off against a lone gunman, waiting until his eyes flash and then shooting before he does. If you succeed, you earn the reward money from his bounty, but if you're too slow, you lose one of your 3 lives. Shoot too early, and a foul is declared, causing you to lose out on the reward money.
As the game progresses, the opponents get faster and the rewards get higher. The gunman's shooting speed is displayed in the top right corner, which also displays how fast your shot is. The game continues indefinitely until you lose all 3 lives. Game B is basically the same, except that you have to face off against 2 gunmen at once, which significantly increases the difficulty challenge. You also have to shoot at the gunman who shouts "Fire!" first, or you'll get a foul.
Game C, Gang, is interesting in that it harkens back to even earlier arcade shooting gallery games. In this mode, gunmen pop up randomly in different windows, and once again you must shoot them before they shoot you. If you manage to shoot 10 in a row without getting hit, you clear the wave and move on to the next round. However, you only have 15 bullets, so be careful not to let them go to waste.
Wild Gunman is a lot of fun, and a strong debut title for the NES Zapper. I absolutely love the visuals of this game. I mentioned in my Game & Watch video on Fire Attack, but I'm such a sucker for the cartoony Old West setting. It reminds me a lot of the old Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote cartoons from when I was a kid. And since I grew up in Arizona, I have a lot of nostalgia for this type of scenery. Red rock mesas, wide open skies, sagebrush and saguaro cacti. The designs of the gunmen also remind me of old Looney Tunes type characters, and they seem to represent different Western bad guy stereotypes. There are 5 total, and since they don't have canonical names, I just call them Dirty Dan, Dastardly Dan, Despicable Dan, Daniel, or Dan, and Bandito Guido. I love these guys, they're just so expressive and full of personality. My favorite is Dirty Dan. He's the only one with a unique animation for when he walks on screen. The rest just kind of shimmy out facing towards you. They're all great though.
We also need to recognize the music of Hirokazu "Hip" Tanaka. In 1984, it wasn't yet commonplace for video games to have looping stage music. Instead, games would, at most, play just a few bars at the start of a stage, and then that was it. Popeye was Nintendo's first game with looping stage music, possibly in an effort to make it feel more like a cartoon. But afterwards, Nintendo games like Mario Bros. And their early sports games continued to be fairly quiet. Donkey Kong 3 was Nintendo's first original game with stage music, and it's probably no coincidence that Hip Tanaka worked on it. However, what makes Wild Gunman unique is that there aren't stages in a traditional sense, so the music is almost entirely musical cues. Lots and lots of musical cues, which makes the game feel very cinematic.
Of course, you've got the opening title sequence, but there's also this ominous little tune that plays as each outlaw enters the screen. As well as the funeral march when you get shot. The game is just very fun and charming. I especially enjoy the gang mode as it's kinetic and fast-paced. I also think it's just really awesome that Nintendo's first NES Zapper game represents an often forgotten part of Nintendo's history, harkening back to their Western arcade games and toys.
Today, Wild Gunman is perhaps best known for its big screen cameo in Back to the Future Part 2, in which it gives Marty McFly the opportunity to demonstrate his impressive shooting skills. But what makes this appearance confusing is how it gets almost everything wrong. The game wasn't available in North America in 1985 for Marty to play it. It played nothing like this, and unlike other NES games, was never released as a standalone arcade cabinet, as much as I wish it had been.
Great Scott! I know, this is heavy.
Ha! That was a rip-roaring good time. However, one thing stood out to me the most while playing. That guy. That looks just like the guy you shot in the street. Something's just not adding up here.
We interrupt your regular broadcast to bring you a public safety service announcement. Have you seen this man? Authorities warn that he's armed and dangerous. It is recommended to not approach. Back to you, Sarah.
Next up, we have Nintendo's most famous light gun game, Duck Hunt. This fast-action target game takes you into the marshes with your trusted hunting dog at your side. He'll flush out the prey, and then it's split-second timing and sharpshooting accuracy to bag these ducks. Take on one duck or two at the same time, and then, as a true test of marksmanship, try clay shooting, the ultimate challenge.
Duck Hunt takes us back to the oldest tradition in light gun games, while also more directly referencing Gunpei Yokoi's Kosenju Duck Hunt. Naturally, the goal in Duck Hunt is to hunt as many ducks as possible, while your dog chases them out of the tall grass. Each round has 10 ducks, and you get 3 bullets per duck. For each one you hit, one duck symbol on the hit indicator will turn red. If the duck flies away, the symbol is left blank.
In order to advance to the next round, you need to shoot enough ducks to cross the pass line, which is shown beneath the hit indicator. If your score doesn't pass, you get a game over. The game continues indefinitely, with the pass line becoming more strict and the ducks increasing in speed each time. There are 3 different colors of duck, and each one gets you a different amount of points. Black and green is the least... Oh, damn. Blue and pink is next. Damn it. And red and black is worth the most... God damn it! For people who feel like Game A is too easy and don't have anyone around to secretly change up the duck's flight path on Controller 2... Wait a second, you cheated!
Game B increases the difficulty by throwing out 2 ducks at once, while still only giving you 3 bullets. Game C, Clay Shooting, is an adaptation of Laser Clay, that old Nintendo installation that first got them started down the path of making arcade games. In this mode, you have 3 bullets to shoot at 2 clay pigeons before they drift too far away. Beyond that, scoring is essentially handled exactly the same as the first 2 modes.
The visuals for the game are fantastic as always. I really like both the marshes and mountains landscapes. It's got a peaceful atmosphere that's just perfect for murder. The hunting dog and ducks also have a lot of personality, especially the dog. A lot of people hate this dog because he laughs at you when you miss a shot. Some people even go as far as wanting the option to shoot the dog. What? You want to shoot the dog? What's wrong with you? Sure, he's kind of an asshole, but so are you. I think he's great, and he doesn't just laugh at you, he also celebrates when you're successful, smiling happily and holding up your prize. Look at that duck though, he's just like, I'm so sick of this shit. I don't know. I think the dog's personality adds a lot to this game, and it wouldn't be nearly as memorable without him.
If Super Mario Bros. Is the most iconic NES game, Duck Hunt is probably number 2. They're the 2 games that it felt like everyone who owned an NES had a copy of, in part because it was eventually included with Super Mario Bros. As a 2-in-1 pack-in game. For the longest time, I didn't even know Super Mario Bros. Existed as a standalone cartridge. Honestly, it was an ingenious move, as the 2 games did a perfect job of demonstrating the range of what the NES could do.
In addition to Duck Hunt's release on Famicom, it was also released for the Nintendo Versus system, with a few differences, including the addition of a second gun for 2 players. In Versus Duck Hunt, the player actually could shoot the dog during the bonus stage of the game, and if you do, he gets pissed and the bonus stage ends.
That little dog is a bastard!
Yeah, that's a pretty common reaction.
Well, we're not done yet. Our third and final light gun game is the propaganda classic, Hogan's Alley. Do you have what it takes to be an agent? Test your skills using the Zapper in Hogan's Alley. First, practice making split-second identification of the gangsters in a lineup. Next, move to the streets where enemy targets can pop up from anywhere. Then show them your stuff in the trick shot, a rapid-fire round for only the toughest of G-men.
Hogan's Alley is based on the FBI training facility of the same name, which was modeled after a typical American town. Think that one scene in Men in Black where Will Smith has to quickly decide which cardboard cutout is an innocent civilian and which is an alien.
May I ask why you felt little Tiffany deserved to die?
Game A and B are a test of your reaction skills. In Game A, 3 panels will scroll from the side of the screen and flip sideways quickly. You need to shoot the gangsters while avoiding innocent civilians as quickly as possible. If you take too long or shoot a civilian, you'll register a miss. If you get 10 misses, you get a game over. As the game progresses, the time allowed to react gets faster and more difficult. In Game B, you progress through a fictional town as gangsters and civilians appear from the shadows and in the windows. Once again, you'll need to shoot only the gangsters and avoid the civilians, and as the game progresses, the screen will change color and the speed increases.
Game C, Trick Shot, is reminiscent of Fire, a handheld Nintendo game that was part of the Game & Watch series overseen by Gunpei Yokoi. But where that game involved using a trampoline to juggle people and transport them to safety, here you're juggling cans and you transport them onto a shelf. The lower the shelf, the more points you earn, and after each round, the speed increases. Once you miss 10 times, the game is over.
Hogan's Alley offers the most variety out of the 3 NES Zapper games, as Game A, B, and C each have a different type of game. My favorite is probably Game B, where you're going through the town. Something about the black background and the shifty music each time the scene changes gives it kind of a creepy vibe that I really enjoy. But I also really like the trick shooting game as well. My wife Lexington and I had a lot of fun playing this game, but we each had different problems. I could not stop shooting the police whenever they showed up. Something about a guy in uniform just makes me jumpy. Lexington, on the other hand, really just hated Old Man Jenkins over here. She was pretty much perfect when it came to everyone else, but whenever Old Man Jenkins showed up, BAM! Shot him dead.
Like Duck Hunt, Hogan's Alley was also released in arcades for Nintendo's Versus system. However, despite what the internet may claim, both of these versions were released on the same day, on May 28, 1985. Which means that not only did Americans have a chance to play these two games before they'd ever heard of the NES, but also that either of these games could have been played by Marty McFly, unlike Wild Gunman. Meanwhile, evidence suggests that neither of these Versus games was released in Japan, where Nintendo was already beginning to wind down arcade production. Surprisingly, when the games were released in the US, Versus Hogan's Alley actually ended up being the more popular of the two. From August to November of 1985, Versus Hogan's Alley held the top spot in Replay Magazine's operator poll for arcade conversions, while Versus Duck Hunt held the number 2 spot for only 3 of those 5 months. On another interesting note, the gun that came with these Versus games was a different style from both the Famicom Gun and the NES Zapper. In contrast to the Wild West 6-shooter and futuristic laser gun, this gun was apparently molded to look like a modern Magnum revolver, perhaps to give Versus Hogan's Alley that Dirty Harry vibe.
I don't know, all these so-called innocent civilians sure look suspicious to me. Wait a minute! She's got a gun!
Wait!
It's just a purse. Look.
Oh, woo! Thanks for stopping me. I feel so silly. But what's that guy holding right there? He's got a gun!
Watch out, saddle, let my soul in peace. I don't wanna be consumed again by vices. Will we ever fill the gap or stay bottomless? I no longer wanna run if shit is endless. Fulfill the same.
We bring you an update to the previous safety announcement. Known for his infomercials and multiple OSHA violations, the assailant has been caught. The people can now rest easy. Back to you, Rachel.
And those are Nintendo's 3 major light gun games for the Famicom and NES. Although the Famicom Gun and these 3 games seem to have been well received in Japan, Nintendo never released another Famicom Gun game there. Here in America, on the other hand, we goddamn love the NES Zapper! Which is why Nintendo did make one more Zapper game exclusively for the US. In Gumshoe, players would use the Zapper to guide Mr. Stevenson, the detective, through a series of platforming challenges as he tracks down his daughter, who was kidnapped by the Mafia. I've never played this one, but from what I've heard, it's hard as hell. Of course, even though Nintendo quit making Zapper games themselves, it didn't stop third-party companies from seeing the potential in the Zapper, and in total, 16 licensed games were created for use with the accessory. Honestly, kind of a small number considering the impact the Zapper has had on Nintendo and gaming culture.
But was your Zapper gray or orange? At the end of the 80s, Nintendo had to swap out one for the other due to a newly implemented US law that required toy guns to look distinct from real guns, because there were so many real laser guns on the streets. By the time Nintendo released the Zapper's successor, branded the Super Scope for both the Super Nintendo and Super Famicom, toy companies had figured out they really only needed the tip of their guns to be orange, and so Nintendo could now get away with marketing a full-sized laser bazooka, which was so large it was even used as a prop in the original Super Mario Bros. Movie.
Then, 15 years went by without any gun games from Nintendo. But the Zapper's influence would once again be felt after the introduction of the Wii and its new motion controls. The Wii Zapper accessory let you plug your Wii Remote and nunchuck into it to use them like a gun. The game Wii Play included a target shooting mode based on Duck Hunt, with the player having to shoot at balloons, targets, clay pigeons, and ducks. Of course, we can't forget to mention the most famous Duck Hunt reference in a Nintendo game, when the Duck and Dog were introduced as a team in Super Smash Bros. For Wii U and 3DS. Their moveset featured all sorts of references to light gun games, including the Outlaws from Wild Gunman and the Can from Hogan's Alley.
The Zapper made a surprise appearance the following year when it was added to Splatoon in an update, in both the gray and orange varieties, dubbed the NZap 85 and the NZap 89. Because the Zapper was never released in Japan, it became an instant collectible over there, with Japanese fans suddenly trying to import it. When the Nintendo Switch launched a few years later, its overpriced tech demo, 1-2 Switch, featured a Wild West shootout minigame that looked so reminiscent of Wild Gunman, I was surprised they didn't just name it that. Or maybe they were worried about the optics, because admittedly the phrase Wild Gunman hits a little differently today.
And Nintendo's light gun legacy continues on to this very day. As recently as this year, with the newly launched Nintendo Museum, Nintendo included a Zapper and Super Scope attraction that harkens all the way back to the laser clay shooting system, where guests can use the Zapper and Super Scope to shoot at images of Nintendo characters projected onto a screen. As you can see, Nintendo's history with light gun games and the Zapper runs deep, and hopefully the influence of this humble technology won't be easily forgotten.
Wow, I don't remember the last time I felt this way. I think I finally get it. You're absolutely innocent of all charges.
We knew you'd understand.
Well then, I guess we can consider this case closed. Although, I do wonder who shot that man in the street.
That was me!
Don Knotts?
That's right! I shot him dead!
Damn it! I should have known it was you!
It was so obvious, how did we not realize?
The answer was in front of us this whole time.
So what'll it be, detective? Are you gonna book me?
Oh, I couldn't stay mad at you, Don Knotts. Hell, since it's Christmas, how about we all go out for a cup of hot cocoa? On me.
That sounds great.
Yeah, I could go for some hot chocolate.
Why, sure. It is Christmas, after all.